This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
War continues in Iran. Well, I mean, is it a war? Is it a war? Republicans can't quite agree on whether or not it's a war in Iran. We're going to bring you a clip compiled by the team at CNN. As part of this episode, we're grateful to have you here. Max Fawcett, in just a moment, will join us. He's got a brand new column out in Canada's National Observer forecasting. I don't know if Max will be comfortable with that word. We'll ask him in a second. Prognosticating around the future of $100 per barrel oil. There are commodity implications to this unrest in the Middle East, this military aggression from Israel and the United States in Iran, and it will impact Canadians. It will impact Alberta's economy. We'll get into that in just a moment. Plus, what prompted Max to take a big swipe at Alberta's opposition leader, Naheed Nenshi? We asked Mr. Nenshi about Max's headline, basically step up or step down, in our Friday episode of the show. That was a couple of episodes ago. He gave us his take on it. We'll ask Max why he decided to not keep his powder dry, why he decided to deploy one, so to speak. And Max wasn't the only one. As you know, if you heard me talking with Mr. Nenshi, Dave Cornwallier, Don Braid, it was a media mutiny. And we'll find out exactly what Max thinks about the future of Alberta's NDP in such a dynamic year, 2026. I know I don't have to tell you. We got a lot looming here in our home province, including a referendum coming up in, 7 months and change now, mid-October. Of course, everybody's talking about that, and we'll continue to keep you in the loop on that. Oh, and by the way, Max was down in Puerto Vallarta when all hell broke loose last weekend. We'll have to ask him about his personal experience. All of that and more to come in this episode, which is happening thanks to the presenting sponsorship at RapidX Financial. You can always see him online at rapidxfinancial.com. The crypto world moves fast. That goes without saying, and your trust in an exchange just can't be a gamble. And that's why we're proud to partner with RapidX Financial, a made-in-Alberta solution backed by the same experts behind those Rapid Cash ATMs you've seen across Canada for a quarter century now. RapidX makes it easy to get started with 3 different ways to trade. You can use their physical crypto ATMs. You can tap into that over-the-counter desk if you have a discrete larger value trade, or if you could use a little human guidance. And then, of course, if you're a DIYer, you can use that secure online platform at rapidxfinancial.com. It's secure, it's FinTrack registered, and critically, it's non-custodial, which means you always control your keys. Because you're hearing about this on Real Talk, you can save a little money as well. If you go to rapidxfinancial.com, use the promo code Ryan50. That's all one word, Ryan50. They're going to knock 50% off fees on all of your online Interac e-transfer trades. That's promo code Ryan50 at rapidxfinancial.com for Real Talk and Real Bitcoin. Max Fawcett is lead columnist at Canada's National Observer and a longtime recurring guest on this show. He appears today in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Max, it's nice to have you back. Welcome back from Mexico. Your trip had a little more drama, a little more excitement than I imagine you were initially anticipating. We got to work on getting your audio here, buddy. There you go, loud and clear.
It's good to recur, Ryan. The trip in Mexico was definitely a little more exciting than we had banked on. But my vacation plans always revolve around sheltering in place by the pool. So yes. Being told to shelter in place was not a particularly big hardship.
You were down there like family, just kind of a standard getaway, classic winter departure, week, 2 weeks, something like that, and enjoying just kind of a regular Sunday until everything went sideways?
Yeah, so it's my son's week off school. I don't think you can call it spring break, but something like that. And we decided to go down to, we'd never been to Puerto Vallarta before. We love Mexico. We're obviously not going to go anywhere near the United States. And we get there on a Saturday. And then on the Sunday, we wake up and see these plumes of smoke in the distance and sort of figure, like, I don't know, maybe someone's burning some crop, or it's just sort of regular Mexico stuff. Who knows? We don't pay much heed to it. And then I start getting these texts from all my well-meaning older relatives basically telling me that, you need to panic, you need to get out of there, it's dangerous, why aren't you leaving? And so I, took a look at the news and read the situation. And our calculation was they're not going to touch the tourist economy down there. This is a government thing, this is a cartel thing, and it'll blow over. And sure enough, it did. But yeah, it made for some definitely interesting poolside conversations with the Americans who were there.
Yeah, no kidding. What did they have to say about it?
I mean, I was very obnoxious about wearing my elbows up t-shirt around the pool and my Blue Jays hat. I made it clear that I was not one of them, and so I got a lot of apologies and a lot of sheepish, oh, sorry about the hockey game, but I don't think they really connected the dots on why the operation had happened and the fact that it was Trump that was pushing it. And they were on their heels a little bit politically, but we all just wanted to, have a good time. And I think the biggest concern, it was nice to see the biggest concern a lot of people had was the people who worked at the place we were staying. Can they get back to their families? Are their families okay? So there was a lot of nice conversations happening with the people working there.
Yeah, what's your sense on why it all happened and the justification behind it? It's a story that obviously with Iran now, people barely remember Mexico, and that was like a week and a bit ago. But I mean, obviously, you take out a big cartel leader, one that has been pursued for quite some time. The cartel flexes its muscle in a way that I think that most people, you talk about the Mexican cartels, and I think people are aware that it's a thing, and that the cartels are an entity down there. But like you said, tourists have always felt insulated, and it probably hasn't factored into the average visitor's everyday routine. But I think the cartel also proved last weekend that when it does flex its muscle, or when it shows its arms, or when it makes itself visible, or when it exerts itself, it's actually formidable. We heard of dozens of Mexican military service members killed as a result of this operation. It was, to put it candidly, it was no joke at all.
No, the guy they took out, I mean, the stories about the way he runs his operation and the levels of security and secrecy, it's wild stuff. And I think for me, it just sort of reinforced the thing that always makes me uncomfortable when I go down to places like Mexico, which is sort of just the split screen of existence that you have there, where if you're a tourist, you're taken care of, everything is pretty safe. If you're a Mexican citizen, it's a different experience. And they were the ones that bore the brunt of the cartel. They always are the ones who bear the brunt of the cartel. I am sure that Donald Trump, who, his administration was pressuring the Mexican president to take this guy out at the earliest opportunity. I'm sure he doesn't care even the smallest bit about the blowback that's going to be visited upon, innocent civilians down there. And you're seeing that obviously in Iran, pretty much anywhere that American foreign policy is being exercised right now. It is purely what is best, not even for the United States of America, what's best for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Let's talk about Iran. Obviously, I think I don't know anecdotally what you're experiencing, but we're getting some feedback to the show. I had an opportunity to swing by a really neat high school in Edmonton yesterday and check in with their students, talk about social studies. Everybody's talking about Iran, and I think that there's this consensus that everybody was taken aback and taken by surprise a little bit when the United States and Israel rolled this out within the last 48 hours or so. And at the same time, nobody's surprised at all. It feels like it's been a long time coming. It's been rumored to be coming. We'll talk about your column at nationalobserver.com on how fossil fuels will be collateral damage in Trump's war on Iran. But generally speaking, where's your head at with what we know right now, a couple of days in?
I'm getting all these flashbacks from the early 2000s and that war in the Middle East and the differences in the way it is being prosecuted, but the similarities in terms of the kind of American arrogance about how things will go. There's this clip floating around social media now of Benjamin Netanyahu telling Congress members that, if you get rid of Saddam Hussein, there'll be this great dividend throughout the Middle East, these positive reverberations. And you hear the same thing now from Trump officials, although they clearly can't land on a consistent message Is it a war? Isn't it a war? Is it regime change? Isn't it regime change? They really don't know how to sell this to the public, but they are not prepared for the reverberations that are about to come, and we're already seeing them in sort of Gulf countries. We're seeing it in other parts of the Middle East. The Israelis are now using the opportunity to attack Lebanon, and this really looks like it has the potential to spiral into something that is well beyond the control of an American government and an American administration that does not take this stuff seriously. Apparently Trump made the decision to attack Iran while I don't know, it was Dennis Quaid or Randy Quaid. One of the Quaids was on Air Force One, and then he's administering it from the golf course at Mar-a-Lago. These are just not serious people, and I think they think that maybe because the strike in Venezuela went so well militarily, that it would do the same thing would happen in Iran. But those two countries are just fundamentally different. Iran is a deeply sophisticated government, country, regime that has been preparing for this kind of attack for decades, basically. And so they have contingencies in place. They have proxies. They have underground, storehouses of weapons, missiles, drones. And their retaliation is only beginning to be felt, I think. And I just don't think that the Trump administration mapped out attack plus one, attack plus two. They haven't mapped out what happens when they respond to our action. Trump the other day was sort of saying, well, people have died and that's the way it's going to be and there'll be more of them. I don't think that's what the American public wants to hear. I don't think that's going to give them comfort when gas prices go up, when inflation kicks up, when the economy starts to turn down as it looks like it might. There's just all sorts of unintended consequences that I think anyone who has paid attention to history could have seen, but for some reason these guys didn't.
MG is not your biggest fan today, Max. In our live chat powered by Park Power, MG says it's very easy for this man to sit here and knock the Trump administration. This guy couldn't put on a weighted backpack and run more than 30 seconds, let alone talk about whether or not there should be war. This guy would never be a brave warrior. That from MG.
Oh,
Max.
yeah. Who's a brave warrior? Donald Trump. The guy who got out of his Vietnam deployment because he had bone spurs. That guy couldn't put on a weighted backpack for 5 seconds.
Here's the CNN compilation. They describe it, Aaron Rupar, rather, the journalist, in sharing it, describes it as a montage of the regime's incoherent talking points. But here's Republicans on whether or not this is actually a war.
And we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
I don't know if this is technically a war.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it.
This isn't a war. We haven't declared war.
The Secretary of Defense, who calls himself the Secretary of War, said today this is a war.
We set the terms of this war, from start to finish.
Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations.
War is hell, and always will be.
Strategic strikes are not war.
Okay. Does it matter whether or not it's technically war?
No. I mean, it's obviously war when you attack a country and kill its leader. These sorts of word games are, it would make George Orwell blush when he was writing 1984. Even he couldn't have imagined this sort of ludicrous kind of totalitarian sophistry. I mean, look, I saw someone pointing something out on social media where they had all these clips of Republicans confusing Iran with Iraq, saying that they had attacked Iraq, they weren't going to put ground troops in Iraq, and they noted that the big confusion in the first invasion Bush administration incursion into Iraq was could the commentators distinguish between the Sunni and the Shia, and that now seems just impossibly complicated for these people. They can't even tell what country they're at war with, and they have a formidable propaganda machine. They have X, they have CBS, they have Fox News, they have all the other sort of lesser satellites of that. They're going to push out their message about this, but their message is so incoherent right now that I think a lot of Americans are correctly looking at this as a sort of half-baked, poorly conceived military operation that is already costing lives and will cost them billions of dollars in higher fuel costs, inflation, you name it. So, who knows where this goes in terms of public opinion, but it has already started out, I believe, with 75% of Americans opposed to it. That's not a great place to start.
I want to ask you about that in just a second on the opposition to it and why that matters, because the argument, and including from Canadians, we'll hear from Foreign Affairs Minister Anand in this episode as well, and in just a moment, Secretary of State Rubio, but the sense that action in Iran to preserve global security, particularly in the context of nukes, I think is significant. So I'm intrigued by 75% of the American population opposing this war or this military action. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says it's justified. Here's his argument.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
Okay. Prevent more casualties, loss of life, the security argument. The look on your face, for the benefit of our podcast listeners, tells me that you're not buying it. You look mildly entertained, actually.
I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. These guys run around talking about America first and how they're projecting strength into the world and, America is back. And what Marco Rubio just said there is they had to attack Iran because Israel was going to do it first. How is that in any way America first? How is that in any way a projection of strength? That is America getting dragged into war by a much smaller, much weaker country. It's just ludicrous on its face. I don't think that will satisfy the American public in any way, shape, or form. And if we want to talk about the quote imminent threat, there is a Senate Intelligence Committee that is briefed on imminent threats to the United States, and their members said that the Trump administration brought them nothing about Iran. There was no imminent threat from Iran to the United States, and the only reason why Iran has been able to build up its nuclear stockpiles again, and I think people forget this because, you talk about us barely remembering Puerto Vallarta a week ago. This was almost a decade ago, but the Trump administration pulled out of the JCPOA, the process for getting Iran to surrender its nuclear weapons that the Obama administration set up. When they did that, at the time that they pulled out, Iran, their nuclear stockpiles were empty. They had basically wound things down. And ever since the Trump administration pulled out, you see the chart and its nuclear stockpiles start going up again, right? So, if we really want to get at the root causes here, if there's a reason why Iran has a nuclear stockpile that's worth worrying about, it's because the Trump administration gave them a reason to build it.
We're talking to Max Fawcett in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Kathy in our live chat powered by Park Power says, gosh, it didn't take long for the price at the pumps to bump up as a result of this war. You're right that fossil fuels will be collateral damage in Trump's war in Iran. People can check it out at nationalobserver.com. There will obviously be implications, like you said, for consumers. There will be implications to Alberta's budget. We just saw the numbers. Everybody's talking about a $9.4 billion forecasted deficit for budget 2026. That number could shrink in this circumstance, right? Take us into your perspective on this column.
Yeah, I know that there are people who look at this and they're not going to say this out loud or not particularly loudly, but think that it's a good thing in the sense that, oil prices go up, global uncertainty around Middle Eastern supplies means the world is going to turn to Canada as a more reliable supplier. Ergo, we need to build more pipelines. We need to produce more oil, yada, yada, yada. And it just isn't going to work that way, I'm afraid. This is not the early 2000s where the world was structurally short of oil. We are not short on oil at all. There was all these predictions of a glut for this year before, Trump started dropping bombs on Iran. So the world is not short on oil right now. Prices, especially if the Iranians close the Strait of Hormuz or attack Saudi infrastructure, prices will go up. But, we saw this in the first Gulf War in the 1990s when Saddam basically lit the oil fields in Kuwait on fire. Prices, I think, basically doubled and then went back down to where they had started within 6 months. So you will get a blip. And that will be good for Alberta's revenues in the short term, sure. Maybe the deficit will be a little smaller next year. But where people need to be focused in Alberta is what this does to the long-term demand for oil and gas. Because if you're an importer in China, in India, in Europe, in any number of developing countries around the world, this is yet another reminder that it is expensive to rely on importing fossil fuels, that their price can be changed almost overnight by things that are well beyond your control. Decisions made by rogue American presidents, rogue Iranian mullahs, like you name it. It is not within your control. And what is within your control is building renewable energy, solar, wind, batteries. It does not matter what happens in a geopolitical context if you have a lot of installed renewable capacity, because you've already paid the upfront cost and the fuel costs are free. And so this is a lesson that is being taught to these importing countries over and over and over again lately by the Trump administration. The Trump administration wants to sell more energy to Europe. Why on earth would Europe want to buy more energy from Europe when the Trump administration just caused their LNG prices to shoot through the roof? They would rather, build out their own domestic capacity, their own domestic renewables where they can, even if they're a little more expensive at the margin than oil and gas, and be able to know that they have energy security going forward. So, this won't show up in demand figures for 5-10 years maybe. But it is very clearly, to my mind and to a lot of other people's minds, eroding the longer term demand fundamentals for oil and natural gas. So when you hear someone say, well, we need a new pipeline because of this, it's actually the opposite.
When you write in your column that, and you're quoting Benoit Marcoux, the energy analyst, you say renewables look more and more like the best path to both economic and energy security. And then you suggest that this should give pause to Canadian politicians, both progressive and, big C conservative. You specifically name Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith and federal Liberal Energy Minister Tim Hodgson. You say it should give pause to them. In plain language, do you think you could sell Danielle Smith on the idea that renewables are actually economic and energy security? The assertion from the UCP has been the exact opposite.
No, not a chance. But it's not about selling her. This is the point that I keep trying to make. If you're in the business of selling a product, you depend on your customers. You cannot force your customers to buy your products. They need to want to buy your products. And the biggest buyers of oil and gas in the future, the biggest sources of potential demand growth are China, India, and emerging markets. And those are the three places where this message is, I think, being most acutely felt, which is we cannot continue to rely on importing fossil fuels when there's another alternative available, one that China is selling, one that works particularly well at southern latitudes, and one where it seems like every 10 minutes we're getting announcements about better battery technology, better battery chemistry, longer duration, lower cost. When was the last time that there was a structural innovation in the oil and gas industry that lowered costs for everyone? I cannot recall one, perhaps maybe since, the shale revolution in the United States. So you just have these competing forces where oil and gas, it seems to be getting riskier, more volatile. You have to pay for it in precious currency reserves. If you're a smaller country, those really matter compared to renewables, which get cheaper every year, which get more efficient every year, and which do not force you to rely on international events and international partners not to blow up other countries.
Whitestream in our live chat says it is extremely gross to be talking about Alberta's budget windfall when people are being killed because of illegal actions. I would remind Whitestream respectfully that we're not celebrating the deaths of Iranian civilians. We're not cheering on the bombing of a girls' school. We're acknowledging that this is war and it's ugly and it is what it is. And at the same time, analyzing an international event and a major industry disruption to better understand what sort of an impact it will have right here in Alberta. Would you agree, Max? I mean, nobody's cheering on the Americans in hopes that Alberta can balance its budget.
I think it would be gross if someone was doing that. That's certainly not what we're doing. We're just acknowledging that this will result in higher prices, that will result in higher resource revenues for the government of Alberta, and that's a known at this point. I think the important point is that we're having the conversation around what does it really mean, and to me, it doesn't mean build more pipelines. It means take stock of what this means for your customers, because they are the ones who are going to make the decisions that really matter for you in the long term.
By the way, Erica's checking in our chat from Mazatlan. She's watching us live this morning from Mexico. I see a good number of people, by the way, to bounce back to where we kicked off today. Friends of mine, a good friend of mine, Bronwyn, was just down in Mexico for quite some time. She's like advocate. She's like an unofficial Mexico tourism advocate right now, trying to encourage people to come back down there. She says we haven't seen anything that would prompt us to feel unsafe. She says you can get down there for half price right now. Anecdotally, I don't know if you actually can get down for half price, but yeah, interesting to see Erica checking in from Mexico. I want to ask you, before we turn the page on this, because of course we have to get into your column on Nenshi and the media mutiny that the NDP leader was facing mid last week. But in closing, your assessment of how Canada's been handling this. Mark Carney out of the gates basically says Canada supports the U.S. in this. I mean, in not so many words. He says Canada supports Israel's right to defend itself. Canada has long been pressuring Iran and working with Iran to get rid of its nukes. And at the same time, there's kind of that whimper, I guess, that we weren't notified that this was going to happen. I mean, Congress wasn't either. But here's what the Minister of Foreign Affairs had to say just a short time ago.
First and foremost, Canada wasn't involved, we weren't notified, and we do not have an intention to be involved in any military strikes or operation. We share the concern of the United States and many other countries relating to Iranian nuclear proliferation. And in fact, we've called on Iran for a number of years to cease proliferating in terms of its nuclear capacity. That's why we have not had diplomatic relations with Iran for 15 years. At the same time, we prefer a diplomatic solution. This is why I have spent the last 2 days speaking with my counterparts across the Middle East and in the Gulf states, from Jordan to Qatar, to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to UAE, and all of my G7 counterparts, stressing that Canada believes in a diplomatic and peaceful solution, and as soon as possible, we would like parties to get to the table.
Okay, so that's Canada's position, at least as stated by Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand. Your thoughts?
You can see them trying to walk a really tricky line here. When the Prime Minister came out with his initial statement, there was a lot of blowback to it. It seemed like he was kind of supporting the American and Israeli effort here. And I understand those concerns. I share some of them. I think that he could have put out a more ambiguous statement that talked about the importance of the rule of law and respecting, protecting civilian populations. But, in his Davos speech that everyone, I think very rightly gravitated towards, was very well received, he talked about taking the world as it is, not as we wish it was. And the way the world is right now, unfortunately, is that international law has no substantial effect. It is, for all intents and purposes, being suspended by the Trump administration, by its behavior. We can work to restore and perhaps strengthen it down the road. Right now, he has to play the hand that he's been dealt. And I think his position was, I don't want to say anything that will upset this guy, given that has already done this thing in which we were not consulted. And I think it's important to remember how awful and toxic the Iranian regime is. This is not just about nuclear weapons. This is not just about them threatening Israel. This is about them subjugating their own population for decades to one of the most illiberal, anti-feminist, anti-LGBTQ regimes in the world. If someone could snap their fingers and replace it with a more liberal and democratic regime, I think that would be, I don't know who could possibly object to that. So I think he was walking a fine line of not wanting to upset the Iranian diaspora in Canada. I think genuinely wanting to see the Iranian regime wiped from the face of the earth, but also understanding that this could and very well may go badly for the Americans and for the broader region.
We're talking to Max Fawcett in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. You know by now that Max is lead columnist at Canada's National Observer. On the 23rd of February, Max, you published a column, Naheed Nenshi needs to step up or step down, and you weren't alone in your criticism and the timing of your criticism of Alberta's official opposition leader. I want to ask you about that in just a second. More with Max. You can let us know if you're watching or listening to this live on our live stream presented by California Closets. Hop into that live chat of ours. Let us know what you think. We'll, of course, integrate your hot takes, your hottest takes into this conversation with Max. And if you're listening to this later, you can always send us an email like Dr. Charles did. We're going to get to that a little bit later on. You remember that audience member, Real Talker Laura, that wrote in last week about the Alberta budget and physician salaries going up and stacking them up against nurse salaries, and it prompted like a pretty significant response. So that's coming up before this episode wraps. This is a very important day, a significant day. It's a difficult day, but also a day when we celebrate a life that was lost too soon. Our wonderful friend, Kyle Dube, the founder of YOUCAN Youth Services, gave 30 incredible years of his professional career, of his life, to building up this organization that we're so proud to talk about every episode, and also to building up the confidence, the lives of these young adults who have tapped into the programs and the resources at YOUCAN Youth Services and seen their lives totally turn around. And so today, with hundreds or thousands of others, we celebrate Kyle Dube Day.
Do I have to come in the suitcase again?
Yes, for sure.
There's a picture of you on my mug.
Yes.
That's very Burt Reynolds-esque.
Well,
it's quite beautiful.
We like to call that sexy Kyle Dube pose.
Tonight, because of all of you and all the support that's been going on, we just surpassed $400,000.
I'm trying to give my staff every tool possible to have the biggest, most impactful job that they can do with these young people.
Right.
Because we're talking about lives here. So we care about these young people. We love these young people, but we're also willing to give them a boot in the butt if they need it. I think that's the beauty of this team, this squad, if you will, at YOUCAN, that we have fun. We don't take ourselves super seriously, but we take the work ultra seriously.
What an absolute beauty. Kyle Dube, we think of him today. Hard to believe it's been 2 years to the day since we lost our friend Kyle and the incredible contributions that he made to YOUCAN Youth Services. That team has admirably pressed on and done an unbelievable job continuing Kyle's legacy, and we're proud to work with them every day to ensure that that happens. You can go to youcan.ca right now. Under the About link, you can learn more about Kyle's contributions, starting with establishing this organization, hosting his docu-series, his podcast, that Relentless podcast, and some of the treasured memories that YOUCAN alumni and team members are sharing. Better believe they'll be thinking about Kyle with a big smile on their face today. If you knew Kyle, or if you have, a real respect for the work that he's been doing and would like to express that by way of support for the organization, we encourage you to donate today. Just follow the link at youcan.ca, and we're looking forward to seeing all of you at YOUCAN Comedy Nights coming up starting March 9th. You can check out all the dates on their website. Again, that's youcan.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers inviting you to a Taste of Italy, a chance to bring home authentic Italian flavors with a Taste of Italy from February 6th through March 5th, which means that you've still got a couple of days left. Plus, with every single purchase, you're going to be entered to win a KitchenAid stand mixer. That's a huge deal. You know those ones. Those are the ones that everybody wants. A 3-piece pasta roller, as part of it, a cutter set, and one of 16 $100 Friesen Brothers gift cards. You can learn more by visiting the link at friesen.com or go directly to friesen.com/taste of Italy all the way through till March 5th. And if you're thinking of going green, Mac's talking about solar, renewables. If you're going to make a decision along those lines on your home front, or maybe it's your office, could even be your farm, whatever it is. If you're looking to get solar panels installed and saving you money, today is the best day to go to kuby.ca, Kuby.ca, and get a free solar quote. Their 2026 installation schedule is filling up fast, so you want to get your name on that list. Plus, it'll give their engineers extra time to get that project mapped out and ready for their installers to get up on your roof. You can get your solar quote today, no risk, no obligation, on their website. That's kuby.ca. Pretty fantastic to see Gabriela Gonzalez join us as a Real Talker, an official YouTube channel member. You can check out our YouTube channel for benefits of membership. And Gabby, welcome to the family. It's always a pleasure to connect with Max Fawcett. Your column jumped out at me the other day, and there was kind of a theme I couldn't ignore. Your headline on the 23rd of February, Naheed Nenshi needs to step up or step down. Joining you was typically progressive political commentator Dave Cournoyer, who was recognizing Raki Pancholi's rise in the ranks. I mean, deputy leader already, but anecdotally, a video that she released calling out Danielle Smith and the UCP really resonated, leading some to believe, including Dave, as he writes, that that's where the real star power lies. Don Braid, meantime, longtime political commentator in Alberta, suggesting that the Nenshi magic just isn't there anymore. So we had a chance to ask Naheed Nenshi about it, and I want to play a clip from that, our interview with him just a couple of episodes ago. Your name obviously comes up, Max, but before we do, set the table for us. What prompted the column? Why now?
I've been sitting on this column for probably 2 months now. It was nice to see all of my peers in the media follow on afterwards and write their own versions of it. But I just have been so frustrated with the Alberta NDP's inability to be a presence in any of our political conversations. I wrote a column almost a year ago saying that Naheed Nenshi should get his elbows up, and my diagnosis then was that he didn't know how to operate in the media landscape that he was in. He came to power in Calgary when he was this sort of international darling. People wanted to write about him from all over the world. He really didn't have to do anything to get attention other than open his mouth. And he's now in a position where it's the exact opposite. People don't really pay attention when he opens his mouth. But he seems like a bit of a different guy. Maybe the sort of partisan nature of provincial politics isn't quite to maybe his liking or his fit, but he just has the wrong energy, in my opinion, for the moment. He remains very sort of intellectual, very professorial. I've seen clips of him in question period where he mixes it up, and he's very good. He's very good at that. Unfortunately, almost nobody pays any attention to question period. That is not where politics is conducted anymore. And he just has not been able to break through. And he hasn't been able to break through against a backdrop that is incredibly favorable for the Alberta NDP breaking through. I think back to the lead up to the last provincial election with Rachel Notley. The federal Liberals were poison. You could not mention the word Liberal without having people draw knives against you. And we've seen a bunch of polls lately that have shown Mark Carney's Liberals within 2 or 3 points of Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. I mean, the Liberals are polling higher in Alberta than they have, I think, in either of our lifetimes. That is a perfect backdrop because all those Liberal voters should be NDP voters provincially. And yet, the UCP cannot produce a single poll the NDP cannot produce a single poll where they're ahead of the UCP. There were a bunch of polls running up to the last provincial election where Notley's NDP was ahead. There were polls in the election where they were ahead. I've been told by sources in the NDP that they have internal polling that shows they're ahead, to which I would say, produce it. That is what campaigns that are not winning tell you is, oh, we've got internal polling that shows we're ahead, and yet they never magically release it. Funny how that works. So, it's just not clicking. And I think a lot of it is Albertans need someone who is willing to fight. And it does not feel, to my mind and my ear, like Naheed Nenshi wants to fight or has the fight in him. And I think that's reflected in the numbers.
Okay, so we asked him about this. Obviously, we have him in studio in our, it was basically like our budget recap episode, right? So the budget drops, Real Talkers know this, on the 26th of February. That's a Thursday afternoon. So Friday morning, the 27th of February, if folks are listening or looking for that full interview, rather, with Naheed Nenshi, you're looking for our February 27th episode. I asked him about this. I'm going to play about 2 minutes of his response. The actual exchange is about 5 minutes. Feels a little long to play right now, but people can check it out in its entirety. But, I mean, here's the meat of it when we asked Naheed Nenshi what he thinks about Max's take. Some progressive writers have kind of taken aim at you this week. I don't know if you saw Max Fawcett's piece in National Observer, says Naheed Nenshi needs to step up or step down.
Thanks, Max.
Which is a pretty, right? I mean, like, that's a pretty major headline. Dave Cournoyer, typically, I don't know if he'd mind me saying this, but typically friendly to the NDP, has pointed out that Raki Pancholi, he says, has taken the lead. Don Braid is wondering where your star power went. How's this landing with you?
I mean, I'm just laughing. Listen,
you're not laughing about
I actually
this.
kind of am, because progressives, I call us Eeyores sometimes. We're always looking for the negative side of life, right? But here's the thing. We decided after the Premier announced that she was going to make this video statement that we would treat it a bit like a U.S. State of the Union. So rather than the leader responding in the State of the Union, they usually use it as an opportunity to highlight the team and highlight stars in the team. And I have so many stars in my team. And one of the brightest ones is Raki, who did such a great job. And so progressives, instead of celebrating that the deputy leader is so awesome and we've got a deep bench, we're like, is she putting a knife into Naheed's back? So I asked her, hey, Raki, are you putting a knife into my back? And she said, and then what would I do? I am so...
Well, people think she would run for the leadership.
Right?
That's what she would do.
But that's her point, right? She's like, no, I was the chair of your campaign, right? And I love the team. And I'll tell you, Ryan, I was worried, right? Because I'm an outsider when I came in to take over this party. These people don't know me very well, and I come from a very different background and maybe a slightly different philosophy than a lot of them. But I know that the Premier spends a ton of time trying to unite the United Conservative Party, and I don't spend any time doing it because I've got these 38 brilliant people who have very different backgrounds, very different philosophies, but we are all rowing in the same direction. So you're going to see even more of this, and I hope it doesn't freak out Max and Dave too much, but I want to highlight Jody Callahoo-Stonehouse. I want to highlight Diana Batten. I want to highlight these brilliant people, Cord Ellingson, who we've got to really, so people can see it's not just me, it's a real team all around me. And at the end of the day, look, we had a record quarter of fundraising in Q4. Despite the Conservatives changing the laws to benefit them, we actually out-fundraised them in Q4. And you and I always talk about how polls don't matter when there's no election. It doesn't help you to win a random Tuesday in February. You have to win on election day. But I will tell you that I have seen 9 polls from different agencies for different organizations over the course of the last 2 months. And I'll tell you what they said. 3 of them said we would cream the UCP in an election, especially in Calgary. 3 of them said the UCP would cream us. And 3 of them said it would be a tie. So,
says Naheed Nenshi on Real Talk. I go on to circle back, and people again can check out the full interview February 27th. And I say, well, it was kind of more than just you elevating the other voices. It's not that you didn't meet the moment in addressing that sort of State of the Union approach. It's bigger picture, and he gives us his take from there. But what do you make of his analysis?
Well, I'm glad he thinks that it's funny, but I promise it's no laughing matter. His party should be well ahead in the polls. I go on 338.com. I look at the polls for Alberta. I don't see any of these polls that show the Alberta NDP way ahead, especially in Calgary. I see a Leger poll that shows them way behind, but I don't see one that shows them way ahead. And I promise you, being down here in Calgary, the NDP is practically invisible. Naheed Nenshi is practically invisible, and by the way, is now being criticized for some of the things that happened during his term as mayor. I think the NDP thought that he would be good for them in Calgary. It may well turn out to be the exact opposite. The water infrastructure issues, fair or not, they didn't get fixed under his 3 terms in government as mayor, and so he is being held accountable for some of that by Calgarians. I just think this idea of no big deal. This is loser talk. This is not. This should be serious to him. It shouldn't be a joke. And the reason why people reacted the way they did to Raki's speech is not because they thought she was sticking a knife in his back. It's because it was like giving a glass of water to someone who's been wandering around in the desert for 6 weeks. They were thirsty for that kind of energy, that passion, that seriousness. Cut the bullshit. Just getting straight to the point. And it broke through in a way that I don't think any of his communications have broken through to the general public. So I would encourage him not to hand wave away a lot of this stuff, but to take it seriously and understand what people like me and Dave Cornway are saying, which is that, you can say polls don't matter till the election, but I think we've seen time and time and time again that polls tell you the direction of the public and where they are headed. And every single poll that I've seen has shown that Naheed Nenshi is not connecting with Albertans the way he needs to. And again, I don't want to have to bring this back to federal politics, but the backdrop here is one where he should be absolutely crushing the UCP. Mark Carney, super popular. Federal Liberals, more popular than they've been in my lifetime. The UCP, scandals, budget deficits, healthcare system collapsing, separatism. This should be an easy mark. And yet he's doing more poorly than Rachel Notley was running up to the last election, after she had, all the baggage that was attached to her, all the criticism, all the 4 years in government stuff. And she was still doing much better in Calgary than the former mayor of Calgary is. So I just wish he would take it more seriously.
In our live chat, powered by Park Power, Gabe C says, geez, you guys already backlash against Nenshi? He says, you've got to give him some time. Ken K says, I agree. Nenshi is not leveraging the constant UCP failures into political capital. Ambustion says, the Raki attacky kicked ass. That from Ambustion. I guess she's got a fan there. Kyle says, please keep Nenshi and Janice Irwin. Keep them and ride the second place wave. Kathy says, I like Nenshi well enough, but I was worried he wouldn't be right for what the NDP needs. And sadly, I was correct, and I hate that. That from Kathy. Cliff says, here, Max and I agree where we often disagree on many things. If the two of us agree on something, then it is certainly something of note. That from Cliff, who says, Nenshi is a weak leader who has fizzled when it was a layup. Cliff, I don't prefer that you're trying to sort of mix your metaphors there. You don't fizzle on a layup, but you could say he missed a wide open layup, or perhaps he missed an empty net. Maybe you save that for an election. It's tough in politics for leaders, Max. The former Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, sat in this very seat, in this very studio, and told us in February, the year before his resignation, that he intended to lead the Liberals into the next election amid all of the distractions, amid the polling that showed that while his party was doing okay, he personally wasn't. It's hard for a leader to admit that in the best interests of the party and the movement, they have to step down. There's ego that goes into being a leader. There's a self-confidence. There's an identity that comes with being a political leader. I mean, look at Pierre Poilievre right now. I'm not suggesting that Pierre Poilievre needs to step down, but when you look at the reality, the party polling considerably higher than the leader, that is where some people are going to go in evaluating the party. I had a guy come up to me in Calgary this weekend and say Pierre Poilievre is now the Justin Trudeau of the Conservative Party, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. But it's easier said than done. Oh, Nenshi should just step aside, right? There's a lot that goes into that, including between his own two ears.
It's incredibly hard because you have people like me on your ass constantly, criticizing, second guessing, and you have to have a very durable ego. And sometimes that means you probably have maybe too durable of an ego. It's hard to hear criticism. And I have no doubt that it's hard to hear this criticism. But, I think it's important to really underscore the lack of urgency in his response and the sense that, well, everything will work out fine. We got lots of money and the polls are the polls. Things are about to get much harder for Naheed Nenshi and the NDP, if that's possible. We have coming up probably, some resolution of the MOU with the Prime Minister and the Premier. I don't think they're going to get the pipeline that they want, but I think the Premier is going to find a way to save some face and turn it into a win. She is very good at that. And we have the resolution of the federal NDP leadership race, which looks at right now like it is going to be Avi Lewis winning the leadership of the federal NDP. And that is going to create a third-class migraine headache for the Alberta NDP and the BC NDP. Because he's going to come out, he's going to talk about fossil fuels in ways that the UCP will put straight into their ads. They will tie Avi Lewis and his words right around Naheed Nenshi and the Alberta NDP. And the place where that is going to be most directly felt is in Calgary, which happens to be where the NDP has to win. I have seen no efforts on their part to inoculate themselves. I know Naheed sent a letter or spoke to him and said, don't say anything that'll embarrass us. It's Avi Lewis. He's going to do that. He did that to Rachel Notley at the federal NDP convention right in her backyard in 2016. He'll definitely do it again. I've seen no effort to come forward with an alternative vision of the economy, of the energy sector. They have no narrative on the most important issue for Albertans, which is the economy. I've seen no effort to, build a consensus around their vision for how we go forward. They are just setting themselves up, to my mind, for an absolute butt kicking in the next provincial election. And it doesn't have to be that way.
By the way, people can check out our one-on-one with NDP leadership candidate Avi Lewis. It's on our YouTube channel, of course, January 21st, that episode. You can also find it in our podcast archive. We've also spoken with Rob Ashton and Heather McPherson, kind of the three, I don't know if you want to call them the front runners. Anyway, the three most recognizable candidates certainly in that race. In our live chat, many of you have opinions on what you'd like to see Nenshi do. Ms. KD says what Nenshi has is a very strong front bench, so they are given the space to prove they can lead. Gilles says, I 100% agree with Max. People are no longer paying attention to question period at all. The battle is purely on social media. Can08 says, Nenshi talks like he's selling somebody a used Hyundai. Says, I have yet to vote NDP. I just can't vote NDP with this guy as leader. I hope the party gets a stronger leader. That from Can08. It sounds like their vote is up for grabs. Tony says the NDP has to tell us what their plan is to address the issues we're facing and not just, UCP and Danielle Smith bad, NDP good. They have to project that they are for the working people. Interesting conversations on this show recently on what working people actually means. I talked to Gil McGowan in our most recent episode. What is a worker? How do you define that in the province of Alberta? But you were nodding with Tony's comment there that the NDP has to do more, has to communicate their plan. What would be one area where you think that the NDP could really gain traction right now? There's a lot. Like, take your pick. You can say, well, we'd start by putting classic literature back into libraries, but that's kind of a culture war thing that the average person, to be honest, like you just did, is going to roll their eyes at, shake their head. People want substance. People want protein. What does it look like?
I've always been what they call in campaign sort of language. I'm a big believer in attacking the strength. So you don't go after an opponent's weakness, you go after their strength. And the UCP strength is the economy. It's oil and gas, and especially in Calgary. If you're going to win the seats that you need to win here, which is not just Joe Cece's riding, it's not just ridings in the Northwest, it's ridings in the Southwest and the Southeast. You need to have a coherent comprehensive plan for the economy, for oil and gas, for the energy transition, all of it. I have seen nothing. I have seen no conversations being built around that. I have seen no alternative platform or plan. And I'm sure they will say that they're waiting until the election to roll it out. That is way too late. When you are the NDP and people do not trust you on the economy and they don't trust you on oil and gas, it is a years-long effort to build that trust. And they should have been investing in it from day one. There's, I guess, still time, but there's certainly a lot less of it than there was before. And based on the leader's response, it doesn't seem like they take this stuff very seriously. I would want to see some star candidates being brought forward. It's great that they're renominating their existing MLAs. I want to see someone with some bona fide business experience, more people, not just people who are government adjacent or people who have worked in consultancies, but someone who's worked at an oil and gas company, a producer, something like that, something that gives people a symbol and a signal. We can trust these guys. They need credible voices on the economy. They should get Todd Hirsch to run for them. I know they've tried to do that in the past, but they need people who are out there selling their message on the most important issue to Albertans and especially Calgarians.
Yeah, but Max, that's also like easier said than done. Like, it's quite possible that Todd Hirsch wants nothing to do with running for the NDP. For a lot of people, they might feel like, there's still this, I don't know what you want to call it. I guess I stopped myself from using the word understanding, because understanding implies that people have come on board to something that is factual. But I mean, we can leave it up for debate. We can compare deficits of governments. You could stack up Rachel Notley and Jason Kenney and Danielle Smith and look at PC premiers before them. And, but there's this understanding, generally speaking, that, people feel like the NDP is earnest and potentially capable on health and education. Certainly that ideologically they are supportive on those big files, but just incompetent when it comes to the economy. And as a matter of fact, when you look at Alberta's track record, respectfully to Conservatives, as a matter of fact, provincially and federally, Conservatives aren't always great when they're the ones controlling the purse strings. So, I mean, how do you change people's opinions there? For a lot of business folks, the exact type of potential candidate that you're describing, they don't want to put their name on a big orange sign and put it up in their neighborhood and potentially, I've heard this from people, kill future opportunities. That's a big decision for a lot of folks.
I mean, it's funny. I've written columns that make the very point you're making, which is that progressives are actually better on the economy than Conservatives if you look at the data. Look, I never said it was easy, but it does have to be done. This is where the leader comes in. The leader has to use his political capital, especially as the former mayor of Calgary, to get people to take that risk, to make that gamble. Yeah, there is some downside for you here, but this is a moment in your province's history, maybe more than ever. With the separatism, with the collapse of, the attacks on the healthcare system, more than ever, we need you to step up. And if you can't get them to do that, that reflects on the leader. There's a reason why I've been saying for a while now that the Alberta NDP has to be investing in these conversations around the economy. It's not something you can conjure overnight. You need to build the groundswell. You need to build the sense that they take this seriously over many, many months, years, that they are investing the time to understand and project strength here. And then maybe you would get more people who would be willing to take that gamble, willing to take that risk. I don't underestimate the challenge that the Alberta NDP faces in terms of getting this message out there. Post Media controls, the two largest dailies, if you can even call them that anymore, in the biggest cities, and they are forever writing columns about how terrible the NDP is on the economy. They have to climb uphill on this issue more than probably any party in any province. But they still have to do it if they want to form government. That is the hand they've been dealt. And I don't think whining about it or complaining about it gets you up that hill. They need to be investing in alternative sources of media. They need to be building their own Western standards and True Norths and all these sort of proxies, rather than relying on the mainstream media to somehow do the work for them. And they need to fight the battles that have to be fought here, or they're just going to keep losing them.
Ms. KD here says, how about Pierre Poilievre's personality overhaul? He's trying to make us believe, as he quotes Marcus Aurelius, that he is a student of Stoicism. says it's so laughable. If you have a second, I want to put his interaction with Peter Mansbridge in front of you, in particular talking about his relationship with Mark Carney. I don't know if you've heard it. It's really interesting. Plus, Danielle Smith says that Alberta may join BC, who is joining Saskatchewan, in getting off time changes. They're going to go permanently on daylight savings time. Albertans voted on this in 2021 in a referendum. Do you have a few minutes to chat with us, Max? Can we get into this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're hanging out with Max Fawcett in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Friends, if you're watching this on the podcast or if you're catching this on our live stream presented by California Closets, you may be noticing this jacket that I'm wearing here. This is one of my all-time favorite coats. This is the Luigi Bianchi coat. You can always tell by that little white nugget there in the lapel. This is kind of the calling card. Those who love Luigi Bianchi, they look for that white little nuggie. Well, I found this at the Helm Clothing, and if you love it, you can find it there too, either in their 3-story luxury retail experience in downtown Edmonton or online at thehelmclothing.com. Heck, you could be listening to this halfway around the world and go shopping at thehelmclothing.com, and now is a great time to do it, because you can check out the latest offerings. Check out the website right here. I'm showing it to you. The brand new arrivals. This is what the Helm is offering up. Of course, browse the selection on the website. You can also go brand by brand. So, for example, if you want to go and check out Luigi Bianchi in particular, can you tell this is my favorite tailor? This is my favorite line of sport jackets, suits, trousers, kind of a classic but modern expression. You can see a whole bunch of them on sale right now. It's a perfect time to visit thehelmclothing.com. Don't forget the promo code REALTALK, all one word, knocks 10% of your entire online order. Oh my gosh, I see they got the new Black Dream tuxedo there. Johnny, it might be time for us to upgrade our tuxes at thehelmclothing.com. Albertans are winning every day at playalberta.ca with hundreds of casino games to choose from. There is a winner literally every hour. They guarantee it on the Play Alberta app or on the website. That's playalberta.ca. Your one-stop shop for casino, sports, and lottery. You can check out the Lottery Bonus Madness on the website right now. And of course, download the app today. Don't forget, you got to be 18 or over to play. And if you do gamble, please use your game sense. We want to thank everybody who showed up to Heartbeat Hideaway on the 27th of February over at Atrium at Sabor in support of that CK Huey Heart Center, that Heart Month initiative that's just wrapped up. We were thrilled to support the Royal Alexandra Hospital and the CK Huey Heart Center through the month of February. And I wanted to let you know, Real Talkers, as a little love letter to you, that the team at the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation reached out to us, let us know that so many of you at that Heartbeat Hideaway event came up and let them know that you were there and you were contributing to the cause because you heard about it on Real Talk. That means the world to us, that means the world to them, and it means the world to the thousands of people that will rely on and benefit from health care, heart care, at the Royal Alexandra Hospital. It's their 125th anniversary this year at the Royal Alex, and we're encouraging you to keep them in mind when your family is planning out your philanthropy goals, maybe your estate planning, maybe making a donation in honor of someone who spent some time at the Royal Alexandra. You can do so by visiting royalalex.org. And for those of you that are in charge of the finances, the future planning for not just your household, but your business as well, perhaps it's a nonprofit or a big organization, and you're in charge of setting them up for future success, may we recommend a sit down with the team at North Road Investment Council. Successful saving can create unexpected challenges, and that's where Marshall and Carrie and their team of financial advisors come in. They partner with discerning families, foundations, associations on that winding path with expert navigation through the complexities of wealth accumulation and investment advisory services. For some of you, that will be a fully custom white glove type experience. For others, maybe you're just looking for a second set of eyes to audit your financial plan, so to speak, to maybe give you a different perspective on what your financial planning should look like. In that case, the team at North Road's happy to bill hourly, and there's a special discount for Real Talkers. When you book your sit-down today, your appointment at northroadic.com, you let them know you heard about it on Real Talk, and you'll receive that discounted rate from the team at North Road Investment Council. All right, Max, let's get right to it. The leader of Canada's official opposition, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, grants an interview to longtime CBC, the national anchor, Peter Mansbridge. And they talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and Poilievre comes across as chill and amiable and telling a few stories. And Mansbridge asks him about Mark Carney. And I did not expect to hear what I heard from Pierre Poilievre. We'll get your take on it. But first, for listeners that may not have heard it on The Bridge, that's Peter's new podcast, here it is.
Do you respect Mr. Carney?
Oh, yes, I do. And I think he respects me as well. We have a very respectful relationship. We actually traveled to, tragically, we traveled to Tumbler Ridge together and got to know each other a little bit better. And I thought he performed very admirably as a prime minister on that trip. And we had a funny near collision. I was out with my kids on a bicycle ride on a path in Ottawa, and my little girl never does anything in a straight line. And so she was zigging and zagging, and this teenager, 20 or something year old girl came along and almost collided with my daughter, but very skillfully negotiated around. And as I looked at her, I thought, I think that's Mark Carney's daughter. And so I talked to him the next time. I said, did your daughter almost collide with my daughter on the pathways of Ottawa? And he said, she did mention that. And it made me think of, we disagree on our politics, but we're both fathers. We're both proud Canadians. And in that sense, I think there's a mutual respect.
Okay. I didn't expect that, but I don't know. Do you buy it?
Not for a minute. I mean, look, he's a very talented political operator. He has new operating instructions because he has a new campaign manager, Steve Outhouse, who ran Danielle Smith's campaign in the last provincial election. Very talented campaign strategist. I think much more talented than Jenny Byrne, who was running Pierre's operation before. And he's clearly told Pierre to be a human, to be nice, to show humility. And so, he's got the story. He's we're all fathers, we're all proud Canadians. I would note for the record that Justin Trudeau is also a father and is also a proud Canadian, and Pierre Poilievre did not respect him at all. So that sort of argument feels incredibly forced. It's the product of Pierre's team looking at the polls and seeing that he's behind by double digits in almost every one that comes out right now. They all have the Liberals, polling 10 to 12 points ahead federally. If there was an election, Poilievre's career would almost certainly be over. And so he is being forced to behave in ways that I would suggest are not natural or comfortable for him, but which are necessary for his short-term survival. I think the question for everyone is how long he can hold this posture.
Yeah, not just how long he can hold this posture, but how well it will land with his base. Like that's always, for any political leader, you got to find your sweet spot, right? There's examples across the board. Mark Carney making his environmental caucus uncomfortable with some of his commitments or some of his conversation around energy expansion would be an example. You look at, Pierre Poilievre, or any conservative leader for that matter. One of the challenges has always been like, how do you grow the party? How do you keep the tent big while at the same time not alienating the grassroots? Danielle Smith is probably the ultimate example in Canada right now with the separatists that got her to where she is, and now she finds herself in a real pickle. But Poilievre can't talk too nicely about Mark Carney, right? Like every other time that anyone's heard a conservative talk about Mark Carney's daughter, everybody kind of winced a little bit, right? Like this is the first time it's been gracious. First time in a long time anyway.
Yeah, I think he understands that the threat right now that he's had the leadership vote, the members, or at least the members in Western Canada who came to the convention overwhelmingly backed him. The threat comes from caucus. And I think his caucus members have given him very clear direction, or as clear as they can, that he needs to not be such a prick. And that's where he is paying attention to right now, is he doesn't want to lose anyone else crossing the floor because he says or does something petulant that makes Mark Carney look even more prime ministerial. And so he's doing his best to look prime ministerial. And I think a lot of people have rightly pointed out, if he had behaved this way from the penny drop, call it when Trump got elected, he'd probably be prime minister right now. If he had held this posture for that amount of time, he probably would have won the election. But I'm not sure it's going to work now. I think people have too much evidence, number one, that this is not his natural inclination. They already have a guy in Mark Carney who is an adult, is a grown-up, does show respect to people, and I think talks more convincingly about the business community than the previous Liberal prime minister did. I'm not sure they're going to go for a diet discount version in Pierre Poilievre. And again, I'm just not sure how long he can hold it. If I was a journalist, he said on the Mansbridge podcast that he's now ready to talk to everyone. Before he was only talking to his base, now he's going to talk to everyone. That's great. I hope if you get him on or someone else gets him on, they ask him to provide concrete ways in which he has changed his mind on something. Because Mansbridge pressed him on that. Have you changed? Are you different? And he just wouldn't go there. It's like he is biologically incapable of admitting, number one, that he did something wrong, and number two, that he's changed somehow. And I think if he really wanted to win Canadians over or win enough of them over, he would acknowledge, yeah, I've changed. I looked in the mirror, didn't like the person I was, and have committed to changing. He hasn't really done that. And so this does feel like a bit of a put on.
Yeah, I'll let Real Talkers know. I'll remind Real Talkers that we continue to correspond with Pierre Poilievre's team and look forward to his Real Talk debut whenever that may be. We will continue to press on with issuing those invitations. Obviously, we feel that it's important, of course, as well. Having had the last two sitting prime ministers in our studio, sure would be nice to have the leader of the official opposition, the man who would be prime minister, join us as well. Before we thank you for your time, Max, coming up this next weekend, I guess depending on when people listen to this, but it's always going to be the second Sunday in March, our clocks will spring ahead. Then again, in November, they will fall back. But alas, that will not be the case in British Columbia. As of this Sunday, that'll be the last time, at least in the foreseeable future, that British Columbians will adjust their clocks twice a year. They will join Saskatchewan, Alberta's other neighboring province, in permanent daylight savings time. Danielle Smith, despite the fact that under Premier Jason Kenney, Albertans voted no, just narrowly, just barely voted no around this. Albertans voted to stay on the spring forward fallback just 5 years ago. But Danielle Smith says, well, with BC and Saskatchewan now aligning, it might make sense for Alberta to revisit this. Where are you on this whole debate?
This is one of those issues, I feel like kind of like fantasy baseball, where like some people get very excited and other people couldn't care less. I'm in the couldn't care less camp. I actually enjoy springing forward in this, changing the clocks. I don't love falling back, but it sort of marks the turning of the seasons to me. But if someone told me that we were going to get rid of it, I'd be like, all right, do it or don't. If there's a compelling case to do it, then do it. I just would like us to pick a lane and stop talking about this, because it feels like we have other pressing matters to attend to. I will note that this makes my working life a little more difficult because most of my colleagues are in Vancouver, and the shifting of time zones now, I'm going to have to remember, like, are we on BC time or are we on Alberta time? What time is it? Maybe just from purely business reasons, we're going to need to go on the same schedule as BC, or at least go on the schedule of not going back and forth.
Johnny, do you care about this at all? Are you the only thing I can think? I don't know. In a northern city like this, permanent daylight savings time would mean that in the winter it would be dark here until like 10 a.m.
Yeah, I think some places need it, but some means like most places don't.
Yeah,
But I do feel like Edmonton we'd be in a world.
It would suck for us.
We'd be in the upside down.
Yeah,
it'd be weird.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Max.
That's a good point.
But I can also, I just did like a bit of, I just punched it into ChatGPT and I was like, give me the argument for and against, because I'm kind of the same as you. To be honest, actually, to be totally real with this audience, this is like a very simple concept that twists me up like a pretzel. Like, if I'm thinking about it, I have to, like, my tongue sticks out like Michael Jordan, and I'm like, okay, wait, so we'd fall back, so then we'd spring it, and I'm just like, so I'm, and anyway, here's what it returns. If you live in Edmonton, it says the case against permanent daylight savings time. And keep in mind, you can also stay on standard time, right? Like there's two options there. You could choose, to spring ahead and stay there, or you could choose to fall back and stay there. But they say, the sun could, would rise at like 10 a.m. in December, which would be tough. Dark matter warnings. Our bodies prefer morning light. So there's that kind of like vitamin D argument, I guess. It's been tried before. People disliked it. You're basically choosing between better evenings or better mornings. There's also an interesting one, Johnny, that I saw too. If you're looking at like in a city like ours, morning commutes, more accidents happen when it's dark out.
100%.
So for
if
those
it's
months,
dark till 10 a.m., I just see danger.
Yeah. Danger. I love it.
Oh, I mean, I'd be sleeping in. We'd have to switch the show till 10:30 instead of 8:30.
Yeah, that's not a bad. Or we could just do it we do it in our PJs.
I actually don't care, but I just think, it affects places like here. I know it would affect us, right? But I know most places it doesn't. But yeah,
it's probably not a big deal.
It's a good point, though. Like, BC does not have any major cities in the north.
Yeah.
Victoria, Vancouver are right at the southern part of the province. Edmonton's way up there. And so, you guys would bear the brunt of any sort of elimination of daylight savings time. So I think I'm now in the no camp.
Okay. Well, look, maybe unlike Pierre Polyev, you just changed your mind in real time, Max. Well done.
Change it all the time. Just ask my wife.
Okay. Hey, man, it's always good to see you again. People can read your work at nationalobserver.com, including the piece on Nenshi and the piece, of course, on Iran and oil prices. Max Fawcett, the lead columnist at Canada's National Observer, and one of our all-time favorites. Good to see you. We'll talk to you again soon. But by the way, Super Chat Ken just kicked in $5 for you. He says next time you're up in Edmonton, he'd like to buy a specialty coffee for you. Hanson Distillery is doing this new mini egg-inspired Easter milk chocolate cream liqueur.
Not for me. I like my coffee black guy, but I will take Super Chat Ken up on that.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. Thanks, Max.
All right.
Okay, so we have someone declining the mini eggs in the coffee. I think that's okay. We saw a few folks in the chat I heard when we first announced that for our friends at Hanson. Saying that sounds maybe more like something you have on the rocks.
Yeah, I feel like if we did away with daylight savings time and it was dark till 10 a.m., I'd be drinking a lot more liqueurs in the morning too.
Yeah.
Good way to hide my
my vices. I guess he's just joking, kids. The trade-off is that your commute home. Okay, let me say one thing first that I think is most important.
Something
I don't care either, but I would say that the commute home would be lighter.
Yeah.
So darker mornings, lighter evenings.
That's the thing. I don't enjoy, but like there's something comforting about the blanket of in the winter when you wake up and go to work, it's dark. And when you're driving home, it's dark. I don't know what it is. It's just a
You like that?
I kind of do. It's a feeling of like winter. You have less demands for you to go out and do stuff. You get home, you get settled in quicker. I mean, in the summer here, it's wild when it's sunlight till 10 p.m. You feel like you have to be out doing stuff, which is great. That's summertime, right? But I do like the warm blanket of a bookend of like darkness till kind of late, like 8:39, whatever, and then darkness again at like 4:30. But I think if we just did away with it, we'd be in we'd be down a rabbit hole that would just mess us up. And I don't mean to say the same point over and over again, but Max said it perfectly. Like everyone down south of us doesn't really get this. You know what I mean? They think if we were all on standard time, it wouldn't really affect people, but it would affect us here. It would like less sunlight for people on their faces, depression, all that stuff would go up.
I think it really would.
Yeah.
I think it really would. And Heavy D McD, amazing handle, says, guys, isn't Prince George a northern city in BC? It absolutely is. And big shout out to Prince George. I think Max just means like he's like, the provincial capital in Victoria, like Vancouver. You got kind of your major centers there, Burnaby, down toward, obviously very close to the U.S. border. But Super Chat Ken here says, I'm good with staying on standard time all year long. So that's the other option, right? So sadly, that was not one of the choices in the Kenny referendum, the 2021 referendum, which, by the way, what was I got to find the results of that referendum. It was tight. It was, I'll have it here. The Edmonton Journal's reporting on this. We'll shout out Matthew Black, the reporter that's covering the story on this. But when Albertans voted on this back in 2021, Johnny, the question was rejected. So the referendum question was, do you want Alberta to adopt year-round daylight saving time? In other words, spring forward and stay there, which is summer hours, eliminating the need to change our clocks twice a year. The question rejected by a slim margin of like 5,000 votes, basically. 50.24% opposed the move, 49.76% supported it. So it was like
sounds like a referendum to me.
Oh my gosh, if the other referendum is that close.
And then Alberta can separate and we can build huge billion-trillion-dollar domes over Calgary and Edmonton that just close when we want it to be dark.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Open when we want
or
it
we'll
to
just
be
get rid of the environment totally and just we'll create our own
the
sun.
top of the dome could have solar
a natural
panels
gas sun. No, there will be no solar. There will be no solar in a sovereign Alberta, right? I don't know. I mean, Ken's suggestion to stay on standard time, we've already spent too much time on this because honestly, I really don't care. I'm intrigued by it. I think more than anything, Max also hits the nail on the head. For a lot of people, it's going to be a pain in the ass trying to remember, like, if you have colleagues across the country or setting up Zoom meetings or things like that, people are going to be late. People are going to miss it. People are going to be having to communicate. I mean, it's going to be a pain in the ass for sure. But Ken's argument to stay on permanent standard time, your body runs on morning light, like your internal clock, your circadian rhythm, set primarily by sunlight in the morning. So that's important. The light tells your brain to wake up. It regulates your hormones. It sets your sleep timing for later that night. It aligns better with solar time. Like standard time is closer to what they call sun time, which means that the sun would be highest in the sky approximately around noon. Basically, the one trade-off might be if you stay on permanent standard time, you're going to get less evening light. So for those in the northern cities like Edmonton, I'm included in this, that get a real kick, the end of June, early July of teeing off to play 18 at 6:30 p.m. and getting in 18 holes. The sun's still up at like 10:20 when you're coming through and teeing off on 18. I mean, that's a really magic and special kind of a thing, right? I mean, I'm describing my own personal joys in
100%.
the summer.
I'm
But
thinking I would have more time to do the things I've always wanted to do, like garden, because the sun will be out more.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'll be golfing.
That is what I want to do. You garden all you like. That's more tee times for me.
Different strokes.
But yeah, so that would be the trade-off, right? So better for sleep and health, they say, under Ken's plan, permanent standard time. Brighter winter mornings. Who doesn't like that? No clock changes, but earlier summer sunsets. So that's the trade-off. I don't know. Danielle Smith says that, maybe, I mean, what are they going to add this to the, isn't a referendum supposed to, shouldn't the result kind of matter and bang around and resonate for a while as opposed to doing it every 5 years? Didn't Albertans just vote on this? Now, her argument, I think, would be that BC and Saskatchewan are both doing it. So it could be, I guess, a bit of a headache for Alberta, but I'm not so sure. Hey, before we wrap this show, I wanted to get to a couple of emails we've received, and we knew that Real Talker Laura was going to touch a nerve when she wrote in. She said, and if you heard this was late last week around our budget conversations. She says she has a degree in economics. She has a degree in poli-sci, and she said Alberta's doctors are getting like a 22% raise, and nurses got like 12%, and teachers got 12%, and what the hell? And it prompted me to stream of consciousness a little bit. If you heard me read the email and talk for like 10 minutes after, my mom this weekend says to me, boy, you sure had a lot to say after that email from Laura. What can I say? I'm passionate about defending family docs. And we've heard from some physicians that are members of this listening audience, and we wanted to share their responses to talk@ryanjesperson.com, including this one from Dr. Charles, who's writing in from Southern Alberta. He says, Jespo, Johnny, gives a shout out to Katie as well, our GM. He says, I've been a daily listener and a subscriber since episode episode 1. Charles, what a beauty. Thank you. He says, I truly value what you do, so thank you. He says, out of concern for basically clarification, and in the best efforts of educating the Real Talk audience and helping them understand, as you say, Jespo, behind the curtain, I'll let you know that I'm a surgical specialist in Calgary. It says I completed 17 years of post-secondary education and work in small groups where roughly 90% of what we treat is serious cancers. So that's what Charles does. He says, for clarity, I have never complained about what I make, and I have publicly raised concerns about the severe undercompensation of family physicians and pediatricians. But I do feel compelled to respond to Laura's statement on your show, as read by you, that Alberta doctors received a 22% pay raise, contrasted with 12% raises for nurses and teachers during approximate 20% inflation. He says that 22% figure is simply not accurate. He says, here's the publicly available numbers since 2016, and he runs through them. In 2017, a 1% raise. From 2018 to 22, a 0% raise. 2023, a 1.5. 2024, 1%. 2025, 1%. He says that's about a 4.5% increase over a decade. In my specialty, it was just over 3%. On February 26th, he says the Alberta Medical Association notified us physicians that a 3% increase is coming, with allocation across specialties still to be determined. He says now, since 2016, cost of living in Alberta has risen approximately 25% per the Consumer Price Index. Federal tax changes affecting incorporated physicians increased effective taxation by roughly 9%. That's a significant hike. He says, and the costs to our practice, our staff wages, our insurance, our overhead have risen with inflation. He says roughly 10 to 25%. So over 10 years, says Charles, inflation's up about 25%, taxes up about 9%, the cost of my practice between 10 to 25%, and physician billings have increased by 4 to 7%. In other words, what they're able to bill Alberta Health, what they're paid for what they do. He says, as a result, in real terms, physician take-home income and purchasing power has declined massively over that period. It has not increased. And he says, and it's also important to note, physicians cannot strike. We have no employer pension. We have no employer disability or sick leave. And we fund our own overhead, retirement, and benefits. He says this is not a complaint, to be clear. He says it is a correction of the record. I want to clarify that for your audience. He goes on to say, P.S., if you're looking for another real healthcare issue that's worth discussing, it's a total embarrassment, a massive disservice to Albertans. Alberta is the only province without access to robotic surgery outside of urology for cardiac, lung cancer, rectal cancer, gynecologic, and head and neck procedures. He says Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, everybody's got robotic programs. He says the Foothills Medical Center in Calgary, one of the highest volume hospitals in Canada, yet it remains the largest hospital in the country without a robotic program. So much for the Alberta advantage. He says, I appreciate the show as always. That from Dr. Charles down in Calgary. Thanks, Doc. We appreciate it. We also received this from Dr. Andrew in the Metro Edmonton region. Says, I would push hard, Jespo, on Laura, the real talker that is stating there was a 22% increase in physician pay. He says, my family practice, my clinic where I work, he says they take 35% plus 5% GST of my billings. Okay, so Dr. Andrew is surrendering 40% of his billings off the top to the clinic where he works. He says the hospital has terminated my and my physician colleagues' contracts beyond the end of this month, beyond March 31st. So for the ortho service, for example, at the Royal Alexandra Hospital, he says that the medical care that is provided for these orthopedic patients, in other words, everything except for the surgery itself, is being canceled. He says they would like to have us continue to work either, one, without a contract, or two, accepting a pay reduction of $1,000 a day. He says, now for context, for perspective, $1,000 a day would represent approximately half of daily income. He says, so my colleagues, these hospitalists, we're family doctors in ortho and thoracics work. in a co-managed care model. So surgeons do the surgical stuff, and then we manage any and all medical issues that arise pre and post surgery. Pretty important stuff, right? He says, so we've been doing this hospital work for years. He says, I've been doing it for 10 years now. We've had contracts like every 1 to 2 years. And in recent years, maybe every 6 to 9 months, nothing long-term, and always trying to have us work for less, but work more. That's been the trend, says Andrew. Says there's also a large number of family docs who work in the hospital. They're called the hospital care team. Basically, patients that are, sick enough that they need to be admitted to the hospital, but they're not sick enough, or maybe there's no space or no internal medicine service at that hospital. And so some of these family docs, they're working only in hospitals, right? There's no clinic. There's no office set up in a community. They're working solely in hospitals. And then others may work hospital and then have family practice. And so they'd get like a daily stipend to make it worth their while. As of April 1st, this daily stipend is being taken away, as some of them, for the hospital are expected to be on call for 24 hours a day for that 1 week that they're on in service. He says it's important that Real Talkers understand exactly what we're looking at when it comes to the workplace and these physicians. So I appreciate those notes from Doctors Andrew and Charles writing in from Calgary and Edmonton. How great is that to have different perspectives from across the province and continuing the conversation around physician compensation. If you work in healthcare, if you interact with the healthcare system, and who of us doesn't in some way, shape, or form, and you've got a take on this that you feel like is not being represented or maybe adds to, contributes to, deepens our understanding, these conversations that we're having, we encourage you to send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Johnny, before we go, I wanted to give a shout out to my new friends at E2 Academy. This was a school visit that I was lucky enough to enjoy after we wrapped our episode yesterday. And after we had been talking about defunding private schools, you remember that conversation? We spoke to the teacher down in Calgary that initiated that petition. She's trying to have private schools defunded. And then we talked to John Jagersma from ASCA, that group that represents the independent and private schools and colleges across the province of Alberta. And he argued it from his perspective why private schools should maintain or should be able to keep the level of funding that they have in Alberta right now. Well, the team at E2 Academy reached out to me and they said, we're a private school. They said, but we are sure not wealthy. They're in a strip mall. They have a modest student population. I was able to sit down with about 10 of them. These are, for the most part, high school students. There's a grade 9 student that joined us as well. And we sat down and talked about a whole bunch of stuff. These are, for the most part, neurodivergent students. Many of these students are living with and managing different disabilities and different challenges, and at the same time, and this is one of the wonderful things that sets E2 Academy apart, they're also very gifted. And so we had an opportunity to sit in this room, and they have these sessions where they'll invite someone in. They call it Ask Me Anything. And so, Johnny, I was able to present for like 10 minutes, talk a little bit about Real Talk. I mean, spoiler alert, they all knew about Real Talk, and they wanted to get right into the heavy stuff. We were talking about Alberta separation. We were talking about the federal liberal gun buyback program. We were talking about, the military action in Iran and the impact that it may have on the global economy. I mean, some of the smartest students and some of the most intuitive questions that you could possibly imagine. And then the students started getting personal. Like probably halfway through our conversation, one of them says to me, he goes, I've been diagnosed with anxiety. This is a student in grade 11, just like maturity, insight, I think beyond his years, just incredible. And he says to me, I find that immersing myself in the news cycle and listening to shows like Real Talk can actually be counterproductive. He says, my anxiety kind of flares up when I'm seeing news about war, military aggression, mass shootings, illnesses, pandemics, and who could blame this young guy, right? He asks me how I manage it in my own life. I told him how much I appreciated the question, and I quoted actually Darren Jordan. If you're a regular listener to this show, or if you catch us on YouTube, you'll remember about a month ago, near the beginning of Black History Month, Darren Jordan and other colleagues of his in the arts joined us for a Real Talk Roundtable. And Darren, at that time, was talking about Donald Trump. This was the day after Trump had posted the video about the Obamas as primates. And Darren talked about protecting his peace. And that really resonated with me. And I shared that with this student body at E2 Academy about protecting your peace and what that means and what that looks like. And the conversation was just so edifying. You know, I walked out of there, I told them, I said, my bucket is full after talking to you students. And of course, their teachers and support staff as well, who rolled out the red carpet. A special thanks to Wendy for inviting me. But the one thing that I really took away from that was these students sharing and getting really personal about their own education journeys and how they've not been able to find a fit in your classic classroom structure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they've said, like, for a lot of these students, you know, we wanted to be able to attend public schools, or we tried attending public schools, and the class sizes or the noise in the classroom. We had a couple of students excuse themselves for different portions of our hangout yesterday just because of the ambient noise in the classroom. It was such a reminder to me about the impact of neurodivergence. I would say the beauty of neurodivergence as well. But hearing these students share why the public system was not a fit for them and their families, and how E2 Academy, as an example of a private school, is really helping these students thrive, was a reminder to me why nothing, or let me say very few things, are absolutely black and white. And I think when we talk about how we fund private and independent schools, a lot of you, for good reason, when you think of private schools, you think of Weber Academy, you think of Strathcona Tweedsmuir, you think of $35,000 a year tuition and uniforms and class trips to Paris and equestrian afternoons. And we don't think about the modest, humble schools in strip malls with a student population that deserves every single opportunity to thrive. A school full of bright young minds that runs in many ways different than the way that we run our standard public school. And I just wanted to thank the team at E2 Academy for inviting me to join them. Had such a wonderful time there. Give a big shout out to their students for such incredible questions. You know this, I commit to a certain time when I show up. We blew past that by a half an hour because the conversation was just so wonderful. And I just appreciate everything they're doing. So a big shout out to the team at E2 Academy. Really awesome stuff. In our next episode of Real Talk, as we wrap this one, I'll let you know, sure, we'll touch on the news headlines as they develop, as they break, to make sure that you're in the know. But we are going to welcome a guest to this studio that will blow your mind. For years, he has been literally traveling the world without a method of transportation. He's walking, he's swimming, and he's almost done. And you're going to hear the story on the next episode of Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.